Hi everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to all of you. How are you? Welcome to all of you to the day of ankles in the emotional week of Gemini. So I hope you don't listen to chaos that is outside, but is the place, the best place where I could be. So let's begin with our topic for today, which is excess. So when we speak about excess, we usually think about that related to physical things that maybe we are uh, addicted to, but it is not only to physical things. We usually don't relate or we don't realize that all of us had kind of a excess in our lives. It can be mentally from ideas, concepts. It can be from emotions. It can be from anything that we have an excess in our life. When we talk about the excess of something, we usually try to think. We usually tend to think that we are talking about having a lot of things and that we have to give away all the physical things so we are not in excess. But actually, in nature, sometimes the excess is something useful for evolution. It's something that helps us to survive. It's something that helps us to keep going, to evolve. So not always excess is something wrong. We have to understand what excess really means so we can handle that in a good way. We can have excess as a way of evolution, as a way of adapting, of using things. And there's another way of excess in our lives that we used to call addiction. Okay, so we have to discern in which moments are we in an excess that became an addiction, and in which moments we can use the excess as a tool for our evolution. So let's go into that. At first, let's um, let's try to understand these two words that we are going to use a lot. So first of all, the word excess comes from ex and cedere in Latin. Ex meaning out, and cedere meaning go away or walk by. So this concept excess is meaning to walk away of something, to be beyond something. Okay, it's the same etymology of the word process. Excess and process are the same etymology, but in this case, excess means to go beyond, outside where I am walking through, and process means to walk through that path. Okay, is to walk through and yeah, throughout that path. So addiction comes from the words ad and dicere. That means ad means to go to or to something, to someone, and dicere, that means to deliver, to give to someone. So addiction means to be delivered to someone else. That's the meaning of addiction, to deliver yourself to something else. So once we got the etymology of these words, let's go into the process of these words. Okay, so here in one life, imagine a life like a circle. So you are moving around a circle that we call a process. Process, remember, is to move through something, to move through a path, through a way. Okay, So this is a process, and we can divide the process into 4 stages, for example: integration, transcendence, expression, and experimentation. So we have this process, this constant process, through the 4 stages. So all that is called a process. So when you complete the whole process, you can repeat this process constantly if you found balance and harmony in this process. And sometimes harmony for this process, it doesn't mean that it's good. Sometimes the idea of being in harmony for some people is to hit one another, like aggression in the families. For some people, through generations, they only thought that the only way to find balance in life was through violence. So that's why they repeat the same process once and again of this apparent harmony that we call the process. Let's see this. Eventually, this process that I am living can reach a moment in which I can't stand it anymore. Like the whole system says, I cannot hold this system once and again. What the system does is to get out of itself, and the people try to find a different way of doing things. The process stops being a process and becomes an excess. Excess meaning to go out of this path. Do you see the thing? Remember this. Don't think about getting out of this process like something beautiful or healing. Take this coming out of this process as just a moment when you couldn't hold it anymore. So it doesn't have to be beautiful. It usually becomes a crisis. Okay. Why am I going out of this process? Because this process is not giving me all the things that I need. So inside this process, I am in lack of something that I will call void. This void that I cannot fill up here inside. This process I'm not filling up here. I will need to go out from this in order to find how to fill up this void. So when I go out, I will fill it up with an excess. As an example, if I am living a process in a family that is not loving, that my family here is not giving me the love that I need, and I cannot recognize that. So I will be in a very huge lack of love. So I will have a void of love. So a part of me will try to get out of these systems. Will try to get out of these systems to find how to fill up the void. And the way our bodies interpret the love is through glucose, through sugar. So we will try to fill up this void with chocolate. So we will start to get out of the process by the excess of chocolate or the excess of sugar. the pancreas starts to ask for it. Okay, so this is just an example of a way of excess, of something that I have a lack of and that I need something to fulfill it. So we have here the next, that excess, as you see, is not something bad here, because the excess is the one that is making you notice that you have a problem here. So you are committing an excess because you cannot stand your process. So you through the excess, you can verify what is your void. That's why when you pay attention to your excess, you can start to think about from where it comes from. Why do I have this lack of? Why am I eating so much chocolate? You can start to go to therapy to understand, and eventually, through paying attention to the excess, you will understand the process that you were living in and you were trying to get out of it, to fill up the void. Okay? So the excess is an ally in taking consciousness about the process. So in this thing that I just explained, excess is an evolutionary tool. So here, we don't have to hide our excess. We have to acknowledge them, to realize about them, and to use them as tools so we can understand what is our process and how can we transcend that process. This is how excess becomes an evolutionary tool. Now, if I can not make the question of why do I have the excess will keep going. So if I cannot notify the excess, it will become something that repeats in my life once and again, and eventually, as you see, it will repeat the entire circle, becoming itself a process. When the excess becomes a process and it repeats once and again, you're not free anymore to rule your life, and you start to be ruled by your excess, by the tool. It's in this moment when I deliver my power to the excess, something that you know as addiction. So what is addiction? Addiction is to give your power, the inner power you have, to someone outside or to something outside. So remember, again, I live in a process where I feel a void of something. So my inner self tries to get out from this process through an excess, to get out, to find a tool to cover this void. But if I am not able to see that tool that I got, so it will turn itself a new process called addiction. So there is nothing outside, nothing in the outside that provoke addiction. There's nothing in the outside. We can then speak about the the chemical process to understand why we need them sometimes, like the sugar, the all these kind of things. Um, but actually, we have to understand first that there's nothing in reality that can provoke you addiction. The reason why nothing really outside is addictive is because addiction is to give your own power to someone else or to something else. So nothing can really take your power, nothing physical. It's impossible for a stone or a drug to take your power. It's you, the only one that is able to give your power away. You understand this? It's only us, the one able to deliver value or power into something. Like money. Money is paper. Money doesn't have any value at all. We are the ones that give a meaning and a value to money. So the same thing happened with addictions. We are the only ones giving the power to something. It's only inside. So in a chemical way, we can explain this in this way, which is we will give the example of sugar as the one that I explained here right now. So the example of chocolate. The example of chocolate is that our bodies need sugar, glucose, to create energy for the cells. The cells need energy in order to reproduce, in order to make their own process of reproduction. How do we take that sugar? Well, from all the things that we eat, the pancreas creates insulin. Insulin will go to, in a tiny amount, the insulin that is produced in the pancreas will go to the blood, looking for the sugar, the glucose. So it takes all this sugar that is in the blood and brings it to be processed on the walls of the cells. So that's how the insulin helps the body to regenerate energy through the glucose. So that's the common and useful way of how our bodies use the energy. But what happened? That if you eat a lot of chocolate, like a huge amount of chocolate, the pancreas will need to create a huge amount of insulin so it can go to the blood and take all that sugar that is receiving. But imagine that for the insulin, it's impossible to grab all the chocolate, all the sugar that you are given to it. So suddenly, the amount of insulin is growing and growing and growing. So in some moment, your body will say, hey, I have so much insulin in my body that I have to work so much that I need more sugar. Give me more sugar because I have still work to do, because we are a lot of us in the blood. So your body starts to feel the need of more sugar. So that's why you eat more sugar for those insulins to work. Okay. So in that level, what you have is that always the insulin will be in the same amount of the sugar that you are receiving. So if you eat more sugar, you will have more insulin. So eventually, if you don't have sugar, the insulin will start to ask because it's too much. So we need to work. Okay. Because of this, we feel the addiction to sugar. It's because our body is trying to do its work. Now, it's not the chocolate the one that is guilty because of this. It's not the insulin and the pancreas that is guilty for doing this. is our own decision of saying, hey, I must stop eating chocolate, and I have to stop at least for 3 days and to drink a lot of water so I can clean up the amount of insulin that I have in my blood. So eventually, in 3-4 days, I won't need much sugar. Okay? So it's all about myself taking the decision. It's not a blame on anything. It's not a chemical blame. You get it? So when we see this point of view of addiction, we will understand that it's much more important the lack of will that we have than the addiction itself. It's not to work in the addiction, it's to work in our will. And here's when we come to the main question, which is there free will? No, there's not free will. Why? Will comes from the word volere, vol. The word vol means to want something, to wish for something, to desire for something. So we set this desire in the needs of stuff that are outside. So we are looking for things that are outside to complement ourselves all the time. So we are all the time trying to find something in the world and to rely this will into the will of our parents, society, TV, money, food, partners. We rely all this will in others in order to be part of something. So that's why we have a lack of will. That's why we don't have free will, because everything that we do it because of a need of something that is outside. So if we want to get out of addictions, we need to gain back the inner will, which brings us free will to choose what is good and what is wrong for us. Okay? It is very easy to blame the others or the things that are outside for the things that I do, than to really take a look within and to gain power back, my own will to decide by myself. So here we have a big chain that we have to recognize and take in count. So this is the line that we have to follow. We have a process that takes me to a void, and that void or lack of something takes me to an excess, and that excess can become an addiction, and that addiction brings me to a lack of will. So now picture this: the will that I don't have is to will, to want for something, is looking for something. What is what I am looking for and wishing for? Something that I don't have, that is in the void, I'm in a lack of. So in order to understand the will, where do I have this lack? So I have to look into my addiction to understand what is my addiction. To see my addiction takes me to understand what is my excess in life. And to see the excess is the one that takes me to understand in what I have a lack. And this takes me to see the process of my life. So in order to gain back my will, I have to go backwards to see the origin, my history, my process, to understand where was created this lack. this void? When I recognize my process, I start to set myself free from the excess. I stop my addiction because now I know where I lost what I was willing for, my wishes. Okay? So I repeat myself. There is nothing outside that can provoke addiction. The only thing that provokes addiction is the lack of something that took away my ability of having will. It's an inner lack. The question here would be, how do we fill up this void? So to understand how to fill up this void, we have to remember that there is no void, that inside of us, there is nothing missing. We have everything, but maybe through the process, through a trauma that we have lived, we locked those things that we need inside a box in our subconscious. So it's not that we are in a lack of something, it's that we are denying something that we have inside. So we just have to find it. So we don't have to fill it up with something from the outside. We just have to look within and try to find it where it is. So for the specific questions about your own addictions and so on, I would recommend you not to ask me, but to look for some professionals, therapies that can help you to find out these addictions, these origins of stuff. People that really knows how to accompany you during that process. I cannot say any or recommend any therapy by itself, because we are all different, and for some of you maybe it can help doing a ayahuasca ceremony, and for others can be psychoanalysis for a long time, for years. Okay, so just try to find your own way and respect your own way. So I just wanted to close, to wrap this idea with what people used to call drugs. That culturally we started to call drugs to some things that are not really drugs, and we started to kind of culturally ban these kind of things, saying that they are addictive when they are not, when anything can be addictive. So in my case, I am, of course, talking about drugs, I am open to legalize any kind of drugs. It doesn't matter, because humanity and even animals, since the very beginning, they were using drugs for many things. So I am open to legalize anything that is not attending to the life of others, of course, that is not about killing someone. But actually, drugs has been always in humanity and in the animal kingdom, and it will be all the time. So banning drugs basically in our world is much more about a business that helps the mafia that is behind it, the money that is moved there, than really in health. From my point of view, to ban something, to prohibit the some of these drugs is not the problem itself. The problem is the lack of education, the lack of education in how to use the drugs, not the drug itself. So it is much more about a business than really education, than really protection. Okay, because if it is about protecting humans, we should ban guns. We should ban knives too, because people can kill others with knives. So there is no really a weight when people are saying to ban drugs. There's no really coherence, because why? So the alcohol is allowed if it kills much more people than drugs. So we have to understand that when we don't educate and we just ban, we are making the problem even worse, because people doesn't have the option, the free will. So they are pushed towards that world with no one to help them in the environment. So remember, nothing in the outside really produces addiction. Addiction comes from an inner lack of will. So myself, of course, I have tasted drugs in my life. Of course, I did, and I never had the need of using them. Just those moments, those times, and that's it, and never again. So it was not addictive for me, because I had not that void or that lack that I need them to supply something that I didn't have. So as you see, it's not the thing that is addictive. And also just try to remember that I'm not only speaking about drugs like marijuana, which is natural. We can also speak about crack or cocaine and this kind of drugs that are terrible, but we cannot judge them with our morality, because we are doing the same mistake if we start to say which one is good, which one is bad. For me, all of them, all the kind of drugs should be open for everyone to decide. And when you have the option to decide, you are not much more in the need of using them, because you don't have to escape from anything. Whatever is forbidden is desired. And of course, for the mafia and for the politicians that are corrupt, of course, it's really good for them to be banned, to be forbidden. Money, 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 money. The vibration today is Zu. The statement today is I am energy of impulse.